These are regional celebrations for women in computing, little conferences. I also chaired ACM chapters, and these are organizations for women at the collegiate level to recruit and retain and celebrate women in computing. The chapters now extend to industry. Women's History Month, no better time than to check out acm-w's full array of projects. Go to URL women.acm.org. Today, we're hearing from 4 panelists from all over the world who will talk about the last 3 years of their lives. And I'll ask them to introduce themselves when I call on them. And weave in a first question. How did the last 3 years affect your life? How did you navigate the last 3 years? We're going to start with Jen.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jen Lamere, and I'm a staff software engineer at Spotify. In thinking over the past 3 years and how the pandemic affected my life and career, I think it was a pretty interesting 3 years. The biggest change for me was that I went from working in an office full of people in Boston every day to being a full-time remote worker and being able to move to Maine. Very different lifestyle, very different way of working for me. I also think that during the time of the pandemic, when we're just at home and spend a lot of time thinking about work and was putting in a lot of hours, I really started to reflect on my career and what kind of job I wanted. So I was working at Spotify 3 years ago, and I started to think like, is this company the right place for me? And I ended up quitting my job and working at a startup. And I worked at a startup for 6 months. And I found that, the work-life balance was really weighing on my mental health. And I thought, I don't think that this is the right fit for me. So I ended up quitting the startup and moving back to Spotify, joining another team there, and ended up, sticking it out and going through the promotion process there. So definitely a pretty turbulent 3 years, but ultimately very happy with where I ended up. And I think it really took that, reflection and jumping into the deep end and trying new things for me to ultimately understand like what I wanted out of my career.
Interesting. Yasmine, we'll move to you.
I'm Yasmine Elglaly, and I'm an assistant professor of computer science at Western Washington University. I started my work there right after the pandemic. It was interesting, time. I had a lot of passion for teaching and research already, and I just found myself have to start in a new role, not knowing a lot of people there, knowing none of the students, and I got to communicate with everyone remotely. It was challenging, and I had to learn how to teach remotely and how to conduct research remotely. Even service was done remotely. And I feel, the biggest impact was not just that I have to learn how to do everything remotely, but also the continuous change in how remote was defined, and the different modalities of teaching and what would work and what would not work. And there was no such a thing like this modality is perfect for all types of students. There were always something that worked for some students and don't work for the others. And I feel the most interesting part of the pandemic is when we're trying to exit the pandemic and trying to move away from everything almost we learned and did during the pandemic, because we would like to go back to normal. And it has been really interesting to rethink the word itself, normal. What is normal? And are there any lessons we learned from the pandemic and what we how we approach teaching and research and service, and we'd like to keep, right, like for the future, and consider this part of our new normal. Yeah, so I think that's it for me.
Thank you. And we had a little hiccup, as everyone knows, that delayed our start. So our panelists have a slightly different order for me. I'm going to move to Jocelyn next.
Hi, I'm Jocelyn Simmonds, and I'm also a professor of computer science, but a little bit more south in Chile, in South America. And basically, I do a lot of research, teaching, service, a little bit of everything. But since I do live in Latin America, there's a large gender gap here in education. So part of my job is also being an activist for women in computing. So basically lots of helping run programs that help young women especially, figure out that, computer science can also be something for me. So also running conferences, and obviously with the last 3 years, everything changed dramatically. So I think it's been a roller coaster ride for all of us. We basically, the pandemic got here in Chile at the beginning of 2020, and it was the beginning of our school year, because we actually run our classes from March to December, contrary to how it's done in the Northern Hemisphere. And basically we had 1 week of classes, and then we had to go completely online with very, very strict quarantines. We had basically permission to go out of our houses like once a week. So it was a big process of adaptation and understanding like what would be possible. Everybody was a little bit scared what was going to happen with the pandemic. We didn't have vaccines. And so I think a lot of improvisation during the first couple of years. I usually taught a lot of very active classes, lots of flipped classroom. And it was a very big challenge to actually think of how to adapt those classes to an actual online environment, where the students weren't actually working on the computers while I was, supervising and helping them. But, they were all just connected online, and some didn't have computers and some didn't have an internet connection. So lots of adaptations, improvisation, and like Yasmine said, with not very much data about what's going to be effective and what isn't, and lots of introspection as well, like Jen said. Mm-hmm. So it's been a challenging 3 years. We only got back to in-person teaching last year, and so we're a little bit behind on the curve compared to the Northern Hemisphere on what's the new normal here. But I think people are very anxious to go back to how things were before the pandemic. And then the world's changed. The world completely changed. So I think we've been a little bit too quick to get rid of some of the things that we should have learned during the pandemic. So that's it for me.
Thank you. And we'll conclude with Hemangee.
Thank you, Gloria. Hi, everybody. I'm Hemangee Kapoor, and I'm a faculty member at the Department of Computer Science at Indian Institute of Technology, Guwahati, in the state of Assam in India. I have been in the teaching profession for over 18 years, and my research area is computer architecture, specifically emerging memory technologies. I teach related subjects and undergraduate core topics. With ACM, I have been on the ACM India Council for around 8 years. And presently, I'm serving a 2-year term on the ACM DEI Council worldwide. During the past years of the pandemic, we have been staying safely on campus because we have a residential setup here, well protected inside the premises. However, seclusion helps to protect you, but keeps you away from your loved ones. So we could not travel to meet our parents and relatives during this time. India, as you know, being a large country, the travel distances and the duration were too far to risk during the pandemic. So initially, it was hard for me to balance the work and life together because we are used to having a support system at house. We have house help, and that was not available during the quarantine periods. And so that became a new challenge. Plus, children had online education, so we had to monitor whether they were really attending classes or not. So that was a new balance we had to strike. Well, related to my teaching duties, we had 24/7 internet connectivity on campus. The institute had tools and software licenses for doing all the teachings and meetings. But the problems came at the receiver end, at the students' end, because some students did not have internet facilities, some had power shortages, and it became difficult for them to attend classes. So how did I manage to spend my time, or did I have to work extra while doing this online delivery? So yes, we had the technology, but I had to spend extra time generating the content I wanted to deliver. I had to prepare slides in advance, plan the flow of the lecture, create interesting examples to keep the class attentive. As because some students who did not have access to study material, they could not attend classes due to lack of connectivity. So I had to prepare extra videos, make class notes available online. So this also took extra effort and time at my end. About some taught subjects, evaluation lab projects could not be conducted. So I had to create fresh reading assignments and spend time generating content for it and evaluating them. So overall, extra effort on newer fronts. That's how the 2.5 years of the pandemic went. And last but not the least, I cannot forget the long queues that I had to wait to fetch the essential items. Uh, and the effect on our body sitting for long hours in the chair, attending online meeting and doing the teaching and slide preparations. So this made me rework my exercise methods and routines to remain fit and to continue to perform my duties. So overall, all's well that ends well. Thank you.
Thank you. We heard from the four panelists about how they navigated the last 3 years. Now I'll turn to a second question and ask them about challenges that they experienced during the pandemic, starting with Chen.
Great. Yeah, I want to talk about challenges that the pandemic brought to my work life primarily. I think, when we're going into the office every day and seeing the same people, you have that classic water cooler conversations and grabbing lunch with teammates. And I found the biggest challenge of working remotely was how much it disrupted communication styles. I think having that network is so important, and I'm really big on mentorship and finding mentors and mentees. And that can be really hard to do when you're working remotely, especially if you're just joining a new job and you're thinking like, hey, how can I get some more support around here? So I found that I really had to lean in a little bit extra to find those connections with people. I also think just in general, communicating via asynchronous, Slack messages, emails can be a big challenge in itself. I think sometimes it can be really easy to read into people's tone and think like, is this person over explaining to me, or do they know I already sent a message on that up there? So I found that, I really had to kind of assume positive intent in these Slack messages. And I found that I had to push myself to use things like Zoom and Google Hangouts over just relying on asynchronous communication.
Thank you. On to Yasmine.
So I just remember now my first ever challenge during the pandemic was to learn how to use Discord. I didn't know about Discord before, and I just found many of my students prefer Discord a lot for their communication, for their gaming and playing and joining communities. So started to adapt using Discord into my courses, used it to communicate with my students, with my research group for some of the research projects we are working on. I found it really interesting that we would communicate sometimes synchronously over Discord and sometimes asynchronously. So it was working for different scenarios. For those who don't have camera, it still works. They can communicate. Students could create what they call study groups over Discord as well. And that all within one server for the course. So I thought that was like really nice thing that I learned. It started as a challenge because I didn't know how to use it. I didn't understand what the server means in the Discord world. But yeah, like that was something that really helped. And one thing that also came out of this was the practice of asynchronous meetings. So sometimes students will not be able to meet with each other or with me. And if they can't make it on time, they can then just report what they were doing and any questions they have. So we went from in-person meetings to online meetings to asynchronous meetings to accommodate, for everyone and still keep the work going, like still having this feeling of making progress and getting connected with others. Yeah, another challenge was some research work just didn't make sense anymore. Like if there was some sort of a research project which all of its ideas centered around in-person communication, that was completely gone. Like it's not well motivated anymore, and it can't be done because of the health laws and restrictions that we had at the time. Don't want to take more than my time, but yeah.
You're fine.
Thanks.
Thank you. I'll move on to Jocelyn.
So yeah, basically, I think we touched on some of the challenges already, so I'll try not to be repetitive, but I think my main challenge, I was coming up for tenure and research disappeared. And because basically you're trying to like figure out how to adapt all your teaching, how to actually supervise students remotely or asynchronously, which is, I think, basically what we all started doing. And also like figuring out how to help not only your students, but colleagues deal with all the mental stress of the pandemic. Basically meant that research, unless you made very explicit time for it, disappeared. And not only because sometimes some projects weren't feasible anymore, but just because you didn't have the energy to carry them out. And so that was a big challenge, like figuring out how much time I'm actually putting into some things and trying not to get burned out in the process. And I think the first year, I think I said yes to too many things, and when I should have been saying no. So I think that was a big challenge for me, at least. The good news is, the pandemic it's not gone, but research has started up again, and so it's not all bad. But also, like no more conferences were online. It was really hard to have those conversations that you usually had at conferences in the hallway, like Jen was saying, like having like actually meeting with someone and discussing ideas, that was gone. The other thing is changing strategies for teaching. That took a lot of effort as well. That was a big challenge because at first I was talking about a course that I used to do in a flipped classroom environment, but then I also teach, for example, an introductory software engineering course, which is more like lectures, like let me tell you about, for example, software requirements and stuff like that. And I had to teach these classes basically to a screen full of like names, no faces. People weren't using their cameras because, we understood that we were basically invading students' privacy in their bedrooms, maybe, or common living areas. So basically students used to have their cameras off, but this meant I would lecture for an hour and a half to a black screen, which was it wasn't very motivating. So figuring out how to actually give students value and make them work in the classroom. And it's a challenge to actually do it with a course like that, which is basically fundamentals of software engineering and how can you actually give them something of value in each class to motivate them to actually come to classes. So that actually required lots of thinking. And the classes I'm teaching now, I didn't go back to the lecture format. I'm still doing the active activities I had in those classrooms online, but now in a classroom. And now I had to adapt to a much bigger classroom because now I had 100-something students. So it's constantly adapting. And this also meant changing all evaluation strategies because it didn't make sense anymore to have, we used to have written midterms, and now you can actually seat people together for a midterm. So it's like, how do I still make sure that students are learning what they should be learning with the different activities that we have, all the things that are happening that are external to the classroom. So yeah, all those challenges, and figuring out who's going to clean the washroom, who's going to cook dinner, who's going to cook lunch, all that made having to be very organized a priority. So that's it for me.
Thank you. And finally, Hemangee.
Yeah, hi. So the challenges that I faced, well, all of us faced challenges. The whole civilization was affected by the pandemic. And I would say it was easy for computing professionals. We had a blessing that we could work remotely and still had a job to continue to earn, compared to other professionals who possibly lost their livelihoods. So in that sense, it was good to be a computing professional or an academician. The flip side of the coin is that we were expected to perform and produce results. Newer products had to be developed by the professionals to cater to the new normal of online interactions. So the challenges which I faced personally was mainly teaching, because I'm a teacher, and teaching online was something that I had never ever done earlier. I am a pure Blackboard teacher, and just carry class notes, write on the board, interact with the students, make them work during the class. I walk around the class and see that they're doing their work. And it was like, come on, now I'm talking to a monitor or a black screen where as Jocelyn said, the cameras are most of the time off, and so you can't even know whether the student is listening to what you're saying. So that was a big challenge to keep myself motivated to continue to deliver. There was no live feedback like in an offline class, so I had no clue whether they are understanding what I'm trying to tell them. However, as the time progressed, I devised mechanisms to get a live feedback using some online tools, gave questions in the middle of the class to see if they are attending. So that's how the theory courses went. Then I was also supposed to take a laboratory course. And that was an experimental lab where it is not possible online. So I had to redesign all the assignments based on some simulator, which I had to relearn. So I had to relearn myself, create content, and conduct that lab session. So that semester was really hectic, more time consuming. Again, the evaluations were tough because most of the content is available online. So how do you authenticate that the students have done that? So I had to take hours of Viva questioning and seeing whether they've done authentic work before I can award a grade to the student. So that involved a lot of time investment. On the research front, online research, I still find very challenging, and I don't believe we can produce good results online. A roundtable discussion is a must. The rigor there cannot be replaced with anything. The peer feedback and pen and paper discussions, whether this works, that works, is the way to do research, is what I feel. So that became challenging. Again, experimental work, which I do, students did not have access to the servers, remote accesses. So I had to change it, adapt it to some more simulation-based work, but still I had to try to maintain the quality. Some experimental ideas had to be delayed or cancelled, so which was quite disheartening, but couldn't help it. Yeah, so there was a dependency of my progress, because I feel research is my passion, and it depended on the students and co-researchers who had their own limitations of lack of access to resources and had to take care of needy family members at their end. However, I became more patient in handling my team and students over these 2 years. The pandemic has made me bow to the technology, because without which our professional careers would not have been possible in these 2 years. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, we heard from all 4 panelists about challenges of the last 3 years. We know there's always a flip side. Were there silver linings in your lives over the course of the pandemic, the last 3 years? We'll start with Jen.
I think my biggest silver lining was definitely getting to take the plunge into working remotely and getting to move up to Maine. I'd also like to share a silver lining that I saw a coworker go through. We meet bi-weekly, and one week she told me, "Oh, by the way, I'm 8 months pregnant." And she had decided that she didn't really want to tell people at work that she was pregnant because she was worried that people wouldn't want to give her difficult challenges anymore to try to help her out. And so I think one silver lining for women everywhere is getting to kind of decide how much information you want to share there.
Good. Yasmine?
So I think the pandemic really did a good job improving accessibility and providing accommodations for a wide range of people, including students, staff, and faculty. And I'm hoping that these good practices are going to continue, and we are going to continue to adopt these accessibility and accommodations for everyone, and try to be less judgmental about people, because while we say pandemic is over, I just caught COVID like 2 weeks ago. It's still happening. People are still getting sick. You know, it didn't like totally disappear. And yes, it's not as bad as it used to be, but there are still consequences, and there are still people who live with long-term disability because of COVID-19. So I think that was a good thing, that it made a lot of people think about accessibility and accommodations. Another thing that I enjoyed during the pandemic was being able to attend back-to-back events. And I was able to attend many conferences in 1 year, not worrying too much about travel expenses or visas or things like that. So that's another thing that was a highlight, I would say, during the pandemic.
I agree. Jocelyn?
So I think one silver lining for me was that, well, since we were already making videos because we were either using Zoom or Discord or some other tool, it actually, at least here in South America, it gave us an impulse to actually create a lot of content in Spanish that we didn't have before, and actually organize it and put it on YouTube, for example, and make it available. So at least here, it actually motivated the creation of a lot of content that the students could relate to easier, because not everybody here is fluent in English. So having content in your own language also helps teaching and things like that. So that helped a lot. I think at this point, if you didn't come out of the pandemic learning how to edit your own videos and market your content, that we all became influencers, but in an educational sense. But other things, I definitely had. By the second semester of the first year, I had a better work-life balance. I was making sure, you know, like I could sleep more. I didn't have to commute. I was making sure I was eating enough vegetables, because I was going to go to the market the one time I could go out my house 1 time a week, and I was going to go buy vegetables. And so me and my husband ate a lot healthier during the pandemic than we're eating now. And we were also actually getting more exercise, because we actually like figured out, okay, this has to be something that has to be scheduled. Like Hemangee said, it's important to look after your health. So that was also a good silver lining. And now I have to figure out, because once we actually got back to in-person activities, kind of like everything happened all at once. And we kind of lost some of the things that we had actually gained during the pandemic. So now it's like figuring out, okay, how do I bring some of that back and now still have everything in person? So yeah, what Yasmine said about going to 2 conferences at once. Yeah, at some point I was listening to one conference on one tablet, and on the computer another conference, and, you know, like switching between talks. That was possible. And now conferences have moved back in person, but the airline tickets are more expensive now. So it's a lot more expensive nowadays to go to conferences than it was actually during the pandemic, where you could just pay $50 to go to a conference for a whole week. So I think we were very quick to get rid of some of the things that we should start bringing back now as part of the post-pandemic world. So that's it for me.
Thank you. And we'll end with Hemangee.
Oh, well, yes, silver linings. I have a few to list. The first one is about learning. So we all got to learn newer things because learning is always exciting. The pandemic kept alive our attitude to keep learning. As established professionals, we often are complacent about our knowledge and skills. We tend to procrastinate. We think we know everything. When the pandemic came, we realized that there are certain domains where I lack my skill set and I need to sharpen it to deliver during this period. So teaching online was a challenge, and when I recorded videos for my classes, I realized that I make so many mistakes, and I appreciated the proficiency of these public speaking and social media content creation people who were very efficient in creating videos, whereas I was making 10 mistakes for a 10-minute video. Slowly, I improved that aspect of my skill, and now I am okay in doing recorded video lectures. And as we all know, when we go live, everything is recorded. Your mistakes are also recorded with it, and there is no way you can rectify. So on the fly reaction of the audience tells you in an offline class that yes, you made a mistake, you can rectify it, but online there is no chance. So we have to be perfect, and that requires a lot of preparation. So this attitude built up in me to become perfect before going online. As Yasmine and Jocelyn mentioned, that the online conferences was a boon for all of us. We didn't have to travel, and it also helped many students and researchers from remote places to attend conferences, listen to keynote talks, because not everybody can afford it economically as well as time wise to travel to events to learn from established researchers. So this was a very good opportunity, and I hope such hybrid events continue post-pandemic, so that remote students can attend. I took an opportunity during the pandemic to teach remote student colleges, so that because online was allowed, I took some classes in another town sitting at home. The global lessons for all of us is that every individual understood the importance of hygiene. So Jocelyn said she did good exercise, ate good food, and yes, we all understood that hygiene is important. We came to realize that we need to be self-reliant in terms of knowing how to cook our food, maintaining ourselves, cleaning our homes, and not depend on somebody else for that. The attitude that I am different and no one can affect me has to be done away with. We came to realize that we are all connected. Even if one member of the community is suffering, that suffering may reach to me. So we have to help each other. And so that a sense of social cooperation improved during the pandemic is what I see as a silver lining. So the pandemic has taught me to be grateful to what I have, be it health, life conveniences, a loving and healthy family, a peaceful work environment. So thank you to one and all who have contributed for our joint survival and success through this hard time. So yes, there were several silver linings. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We're going to switch gears now. We heard from four very agile women who navigated the pandemic well. They met the challenges that happened in their lives, and they found silver linings too. I thank all of you for sharing. We're going to spend the last few minutes taking questions from the audience, and we already have a couple of questions chatted out. I'll just invite anyone of the four of you who wishes to speak in any order. Our first question is, has cross-regional collaboration changed during the pandemic?
I definitely think so. I'm working on a project right now with people from Italy, Spain, Sweden, England, and Canada. And so I think Pre-COVID, it would have been really easy to just find people that, again, you're having lunch with or seeing around the office and try to collaborate with them. But I think when more people are remote, it kind of feels like everybody's on the same playing field, and kind of the biggest barrier is just time zones. And if we can find a way around that, it's a lot easier to work together.
Thank you.
I'd also like to chime in with that question. Well, for those that don't know, Chile is a very long and narrow country, and basically, I think about 50% of us live right in the center. And this means usually that it's basically we talk amongst ourselves in the center, and everybody on the extremes say, oh, what about us? And everybody's like, no, you're too far away. We can't talk to you, or we can't visit you. There's not enough time. But the pandemic changed everything. So we actually started up a new research project with people from all the very north or the very south of the country, because like Jen said, basically everybody was on their computers now. So not having these meetings, not actually thinking about how to collaborate like coming out of our central zone, it really forced us to think about collaboration with people from other parts of the country, and also with people from other parts of South America. Basically you removed a barrier to entry, which was the traveling to these places. So definitely we started up new projects that are actually working out quite well at the moment.
Yasmine or Hemangee want to answer?
I'd like to add one thing. Also, staying online for long periods of time allowed me to see new people, connect with new people, whether this is on Twitter or LinkedIn, just learning about their work, which opens opportunities for collaboration. I wouldn't have even that time before because of commuting or spending this time with people in physical spaces. But now that, it's just the open wide internet, you can meet anyone online and learn about their work and then connect with them.
Yeah, same with me. I mean, during those 2 years, I have attended more webinars compared to the 5 years earlier to that. So sitting at home, attending everything, because everything was webcast. Earlier, even if I had the wish, if I cannot travel to the conference, I was not able to attend. So it helped me to learn things, and collaboration. Yes, of course, the time zones do matter a bit, how to manage the time zones across. Within India, we are able to collaborate, but outside it's still challenging. People have to get used to working either early morning or late night for some meetings, but I think it will improve.
I'll answer the question too, as the moderator. The 3-year period just happened to coincide, it was a perfect storm, with writing a book for ACM Press. The book is about the women of ACMW, and the largest portion includes stories from the women of ACMW. So it was a perfect time for women to reflect about their lives and find a sort of theme that encompassed their entire life. So I think it worked out well for an individual project. We have another question, and I invite others to give us a third or fourth or fifth question. This question says, does anyone know any females with late autism diagnosis? That happened to me, and I lost my teaching career because of the stress of it all. And I would just start with ACMW that I've talked about now lies within the domain of a DEI council for ACM. And I would invite anyone also to look at the web pages because the definition of disability within computer science has expanded, and there are sources of help within ACM. Anyone else?
Yeah, all these acm-w, as you rightly pointed out, they have workshops and celebrations where people interact and they get advice from the community and experts about how to handle. Of course, I have no experience of this particular disability, but if a person goes and attends and interacts with established people, we get an internal encouragement, and I'm sure support will be available. So one should reach out to more to ACM. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have a specific case, but I think this falls under what Hemangee says, like sometimes you can get help locally, but it's actually you can always use coping strategies, but you know, it's hard to cope and mask all the time, and so I can definitely see that it's been a big challenge to colleagues that have a certain diagnosis with respect to their mental health. It's a very complicated issue, and it's unfortunate that that happened to that person.
Absolutely agree.
So I would just like to emphasize that we really need to work harder on understanding disabilities and accommodating not only students, but also faculty and staff. I mean, there are things to be researched and things to be understood, and then accommodations to be put in place. We just really need to push ourselves in this direction and not like hide or not just pretend that, you know, these problems don't exist.
I agree. And I think this is a particular problem for computing. Statistics indicate that our profession has a much higher incidence of autism than the general population. So it behooves us as a professional body to address this issue. I know we're starting an effort at my very small school. In the chat, there's a mention about opportunities to reflect on the built-in inequalities for females in technology. I know that I love Jen's point that she shared about her friend and the control of one's own information. And I've found something akin to that with our faculty meetings. Whoever is the chief caregiver for children, my own case for an elderly mother, does not have to be present physically for the meeting. And I think these care duties often fall disproportionately on women. So I think it's a great advantage to equal the playing field for women within important large meetings. So if we don't have another chat item, again, this third one says reflecting on the inequality. So let's ask that a little more specifically. Did the pandemic for you address inequalities for women? Did it in any way better the situation for women, address the issue of inequality?
I would take that. I had a few points to and for and against about this. The 4 point is, yes, it has leveled the playing field to some extent, because I could attend meetings which are post office hours or some overlap with the lunchtime. Certain meetings extend, and then we have commitments back home about it. And so if you can attend it online from home, you can also be able to manage, because you save the commute time, and so that levels the playing field for us, the so-called primary caregivers of the home. So that is the positive aspect. One negative aspect about having online meetings is that it is very difficult for us to get heard in the meeting. If you're physically present, you can push up your point, you can physically also say that you can stand up, you can express yourself more clearly if you want to convey something. But in an online meeting, it all depends whether the community wants to listen to what you want to say. So that puts a limitation on how my points are conveyed and executed. So both aspects to the thing.
And I think we were also very quick to learn about Zoom bombing, especially for feminist events. We had to be very conscious about how we were, for example, transmitting events, if we were going to have moderators, how we could eject people from meetings quickly, if they were going to start showing pornography on screen. So I think in some aspects, it leveled the playing ground. Like it gave us fairer access to some things. But at least in our region, the conditions for women in general did not improve over the pandemic.
Oh. We have a third question. Do you think post-pandemic increased addiction to electronic gadgets? And I'll answer yes. Anyone else that have a more articulate answer than mine?
I think definitely, because everybody's like looking at their cell phone, it vibrates, it makes a noise, and it's an easy distraction. So yeah, I definitely think that more people are it's hard to actually let go sometimes. And I think some of the older people here, I include myself there, we didn't actually grow up with all this technology. So I think it was easier for us to actually unplug. But I see my students and I'm seeing that they're going to get a little hump because they're always like hunched over their computers or their tablets or their cell phones. But it's a different culture for them as well. It's a different way of interacting with people, and it's hard to say if it's good or bad. We don't know the consequences yet.
Yeah, I would like to add that yes, yes is the answer. And as Jocelyn said, we who did not grow up with these gadgets, we easily could avoid using them when we have focused time to spend. But the new generation and our students are definitely hooked up to these gadgets. The disadvantage with this addiction is that they got used to getting every content on their laptops. So even the classes were there online. So in the offline classes, now they think, why should I go all the way to attend the class where there are videos of the same topic available online and I can just see them and learn. So, but this, the habit of interaction, the emotional connect which we do during physical lectures with our classmates. So that aspect is missing because of to those students who went through these 2 years of COVID. So I think we have to do something to bring them to classrooms away from the gadgets so that they understand that there is some other dimension to life apart from just one-way communication, one-way seeing a video and understanding, whereas an offline one would give you a overall perspective, learning together. So that is that has affected. So that is the effect of this addiction. Yeah.
I have kind of an opposite opinion. So I feel for some students, they actually miss the presence of being with others in the same classroom. Like I was just reading over my course evaluation, and one student mentioned that, well, I prefer not to be in a lab so I can see other students in the classroom. They prefer just like, the physical presence of others around them. So I feel for some people, maybe they actually miss being with others and, trying to move away from electronics in general.
Okay, it is 12:56 Eastern Time. I want to thank all of the panelists advantage of Zoom. I got to meet 4 new people, lovely people. I enjoyed hearing everything you had to say and sharing with our broader audience. I want to thank ACM for inviting us all to participate as we close out the final days of Women's History Month. So we will close out our session right now. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.